Well, the Carolina Hurricanes have just 4 games left in the 25-26 regular season, and the Canes have been playing well, winning 4 of their last 5 games and outscoring the opposition 23-17. They've clinched the playoffs for an 8th straight year, and some people think this is the best version of the Carolina Hurricanes we've seen in all of those years. As the playoffs draw closer, what are the Hurricanes' strengths across the board? What areas, if any, should the Canes be concerned about heading into the playoffs? And is there anything important left to battle for in these last 4 games? Joining me as always to discuss this and more are hockey savants, Aaron and Katie, and I'm delighted to welcome back in our special guest, Canes TV Analyst, Shane Willis. Folks.
Tom, it is great to be with you. Ladies, great to be back with you talking a little bit of Canes hockey and playoff hockey.
You know, it's been a good run for the Canes. They're sitting very nicely in first in the East, 4 points ahead of Tampa, Buffalo, and Montreal. They, of course, took the Metro and claimed that last night. And they're sitting second overall in the National Hockey League, just 2 points behind Dallas. So they've quietly been on a run. Shane, what are you seeing?
Well, it's never quiet when, I'm in the booth watching, obviously with Trip and Mike and Hannah, but I think this team has had a couple bumps in the road, obviously, as you go down the stretch. Once you've clinched the playoff position, mentally being sharp every single game. It was tough back-to-back as you went from home to Ottawa just for 1 game. But I thought last night, beating the Bruins kind of solidified your position atop the Metro Division, which I think everyone knew they were going to with the record they've had in the Metro this season. I wouldn't call it up and down. I would call it just a little bit of the regular bumps and bruises you see during a season. As long and grueling of a season as this has been for every player with the condensed schedule. And I think as fans, and Mike and I talk about this all the time on our podcast, that we love it. Everyone's energized. Everyone is, enthralled with the Hurricanes and the wave of emotions we have. But the one thing with the season being so long, we try and stay even keel because when I take a step back and you look around the league, every team goes through the bumps and bruises of a season. Even the Colorado Avalanche have lost a few lately. No one's reaching for the panic button there yet. And I think now that the Hurricanes have solidified number 1 in the Metro, I think that allows people to kind of exhale with 4 games to go and really prepare yourself. And as we're going to talk about, to look at the strength of this team, look at areas maybe of concern, and then what will they need to do to make that long run to the Stanley Cup championship.
Yeah, for sure. And like you said, I think this is right, Shane. We focus so much on the Canes, and the same things are happening with the other teams, of course, and you're just not paying attention, so you're not feeling the same. Well, Katie does sometimes with the Avs, and of course, Aaron does with the Canadiens, but I don't have to worry too much about that because I just worry about the Hurricane. But anyway, yeah, that's excellent. And, I thought we would take a look at the different positions, as you mentioned, and take a look at what's been working well and if we have any concerns. I thought we'd kick it off with goaltending. And, this is an area that we've talked a lot about on Storm Tracker. We've been keeping a close eye on it throughout the year. Brandon Bussi's story has been amazing, of course. 30 wins now, and it's just incredible what he's done. But I think, some questions. Aaron?
Well, I think that there's this sense among Canes fans, and I don't think it's necessarily 100% accurate, but there's been a sense that there have been at least a couple of times when they were right there in the playoffs, heading towards maybe getting through that Eastern Conference final for the first time in quite a while. And that goaltending is what has come up short. And I saw on Twitter this morning that Adam Gold's pushing back against that idea. He's saying, no, they've never lost a series entirely because of goaltending. Goaltending has not cost them a series. And when you look at what's happened in the series, I mean, obviously one area can't be the only reason that a team doesn't manage to get things done. So I think that that's a fair point to make. So when you look at Bussi and Andersen, you have to say, okay, right now they're going through what a lot of other goaltenders in the league are going through. The way that they've been tracking the statistics has changed. The fact that the Canes system doesn't allow a lot of shots to get through to the goaltenders, so that they're seeing all the high danger shots and not as many of the medium and low danger shots. They don't get into that rhythm. Given what they're dealing with, though, they have been a factor in, the Canes having 50 wins on the season. You can't completely put that aside and say that they're just, not capable of doing it. Would we like to see the additional save here and there from both guys? Yeah, and I think that the biggest thing for me is I would like to see Bussi kind of get back into that confidence that he had prior to the Olympic break. I think that he's been, if anything, it seems like more of a mental struggle, just a little bit, to get back into that rhythm. But I don't think that either one of them is the sole reason that the Canes have lost any of the recent games that they've lost. And we've said that those are bumps and bruises everybody's having. They haven't lost an unusual number of games down the stretch or anything like that. They're doing very well. So.
Well, it's interesting when you talk about the statistical view of goaltending now changing a little bit. The NHL save percentage, average save percentage by team this year is under 900. It's 896. So this is kind of interesting. The only three teams above 900 are the Sabres, Wild, and the Avalanche. And that's, you look at that, and in the past, there have been lots of goaltenders and teams over 900. So it's changed a lot. The Canes sitting at 876. Shane, thoughts?
I think as you go towards the playoffs, I always look at one thing. I'm not diving into the numbers and only focus on save percentage, because you have to look at how much the Hurricanes suppress in shots, which is very difficult for a goaltender to get those numbers high if he gives up 2 or 3 goals.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with Aaron in the fact that when you lose a game, and I see this from coaching youth all the way in the professional levels, it's pretty easy to turn to your right and point at the guy and say, why didn't you save that? Well, let's take 2 steps earlier. Why did you turn that puck over in the slot? Why did you, take that bad penalty to give the other team a power play? It's the easiest out in the game to say, well, it's the goalie's fault. But I think the Hurricanes have shown that they've given their goalies more run support this year. Their goalies have made the key saves at key moments. But to be on the honest factor of things, as we get to the playoffs, that is probably my one question mark for the team going in. Is the goaltending situation, when the pressure even gets higher, are the key saves going to be their key moments? So This team we know is going to suppress. You're going to get less than 20 shots a game. You're going to need your goaltender to make those saves at key moments. I still believe either one of the goaltenders has that ability, and it's just a matter of one getting on one of those hot confidence rolls that carries you through a round, and then you're reassessing once again as you get there. But there's so many other things compacted into scoring goals. I saw people turn and looking at me last night when the Bruins scored a couple. I'm like, it was the first shot of the game. He should have saved that one. The next one was point blank one-timer right in front. I'm like, what is he supposed to do? Like, the grade A's that we gave up last night were not usual for the Carolina Hurricanes. And that's how the Bruins scored their goals. And it was too easy just to point fingers at the goaltender saying, well, what is he doing? Sure, there were times when he didn't look as confident as you want him to, but there's so many other factors that I look at when goals are scored besides of how did he let that in?
Well, and I think that's a discussion that is another major point with the Canes is the number of grade A's that they do give up. And it's difficult for these goalies. They don't get any shots, so they're not worn, they're not in the game, and all of a sudden, like the other night against the Islanders, what was it, 6 or 7 shots after 2 periods, and it's ridiculous numbers or whatever. I mean, how can a goalie be sharp? They're not even touching the puck. And then all of a sudden somebody comes in with a grade A. So, again, I think save percentage, sure. And, Trip Tracy has mentioned repeatedly that, he thinks 900 save percentage is what's needed in the playoffs. I don't know how they're going to get there, given the style of play the Canes do. Katie, what are you thinking about who starts for the Canes in the playoffs?
At this point, it really could be a coin flip, but I am edging towards Bussi. I think he's got the bigger volume of work that he has been successful with this year, that he has a higher ceiling that he can get to. And I think you feel more comfortable having Andersen as a backup, that if something does go sideways, you bring in that steady presence that ice water in the veins type attitude that Andersen can bring, rather than someone who's a little bit more of a question mark, because we don't know what Bussi looks like in the playoffs. And if he were to come off cold off of the bench, you might be putting him at an even bigger disadvantage. So I think with his body of work, Bussi has earned the ability to start game one, provided that things go smoothly these next 4 games, and that the Canes will feel confident knowing that they have Bussi there to hopefully continue his wonderful season he's had so far. And then if needed, Freddie is there to pinch hit with all of the experience and leadership that he provides as well.
If 52 is ready, then what do you do?
That was coming up next for you.
Only time will tell, right? How close he gets to, does he get in a game next week before the season's over? Can he start a playoff round without playing in a game? You know, those are all things you have to factor in.
Yeah, and he could play in Chicago, meet for the Wolves as well. You know, he could do a conditioning stint before the playoffs or whatever. We talked a lot about Piotr in recent weeks with the hope that he might come back, because, you know, it's strange because neither one of the goalies is taking claim right now. I mean, Brandon was doing that earlier in the year, but he's not doing it right now. But, you know, the interesting thing about Brandon Bussi, his goals against average is only 2.5, like 2.52. So, I mean, these are pretty good numbers. His save percentage, sure, it's under 900, but you know, I think the bigger concern is you know, the last short time he hasn't been since the Olympic break. He wasn't quite as sharp as before then. But yeah, if Piotr comes back, that'll be fun. We'll have 3 guys we can draw on, so we'll see how that plays out. That's kind of cool. You know, when we talk about the challenges the goaltenders have had, I think that takes us right to the D corps. And some of the things that have been happening with the defensive core. Last night was interesting. We kind of chuckled before you came on, Shane, and said, hey, we never thought that Rod Brind'Amour would start doing the Brind'Amour stuff on the defensive core because he's left them together all year. And last night we see that he's going to do that. What were you thinking when you saw that?
Well, out of the Ottawa game, I wondered if he would do anything, right? Because the Ottawa game was so bad, everyone was kind of disengaged. You saw some mistakes as D pairs were on the ice. So I think he mixed things up and then quickly realized, well, we can't do this because these guys have played together for so long. It's a tough spot to make the switch in this late in the season. He quickly switched back in the second period, and you kind of saw everybody fall back into place and do things the right way. Sure, there were still mistakes made, but from a D corps, you know, I love Chatfield and Slavin, especially at home, because you're going to get the matchups you want against top lines. I think Sean Walker's played excellent with DeAndre Miller. And then I think Shane Gostisbehere has the right demeanor and skill level to play with Nikishin, a young player, and kind of he's able to rebound if there's mistakes being made. I really like those combinations all year long. I think that's what we'll see for the rest of the way out. But there's just a little bit of an up and down. I think you have consistency in your top pair. I saw Jalen Chatfield walk out of the rink today. He seemed to be fine. I don't know if he sits out tomorrow in Chicago, as he left the game late last night, but he looked like he was okay. As I mentioned, I've loved Walker's game throughout the year. Nikishin has had his bumps and bruises. DeAndre Miller, I was texting with somebody the other night, to me is your wild card on defense. Because when DeAndre Miller's on his game, right? Elite level. When he's off his game, he's off his game like we all have at certain times. I'm trying to always look for the middle ground, right? I want a little bit of the Trip would call it, and Rod called it on some of his shows, the B game. There doesn't seem to be a B game. It's either elite game or off game. I got to find a little middle game sometimes. So, you know, it was evident in Ottawa. You know, unfortunately, some of the things stand out. Mistake last night, you know, on one of the goals against the Bruins. But to me, when I look at the D corps, everyone's going to be like, well, what's Alex Nikishin going to do? My wild card is DeAndre Miller, because if he's elite, this team's going to be really hard to beat.
Well, you know, you mentioned Alex Nikishin. Okay, now I followed Alex closely last year with Dick Bass when he was in Russia, and so I've been all over Alex for months. And he started the season, he had what you might expect as a rookie in the National Hockey League. He had, some challenges, and he got to play a lot of ice early on in the season, due to the injuries and so on, which is great. Katie, what are you seeing with Alex Nikishin?
I'm seeing a lot more confidence. Every single game that he gets under his belt, he seems to just intuitively know where he's supposed to be, what he's supposed to do. I particularly like him on the pairing with Ghost. When I've been looking at stats recently, I've been taking the sample size since the Olympic break. What are the trends? How are they playing? And that is the D pair that is on the right side of the goals for, goals against at 5-on-5. They're taking their matchups well. They're not obviously getting the heavy matchups that Slavin and Chatfield are getting. But when they get their opportunities, they are taking advantage of them in order to drive play forward, to get the puck out of the zone, to move it through the neutral zone, and then to support their forwards in the offensive zone. And like you said, there's something about Nikishin and Ghost that just makes sense. The mentor versus the rookie side, as well as their skill sets complementing each other. So I hope to see more of them moving forward, even though Nikishin and Walker looked very strong in last night's game as well. I think they were the best D pair possession-wise in last night's game.
Yeah, and it gave Alex a chance to get back to the left side, although he has been rock solid on the right. I've been so impressed with his ability to keep pucks in at the offensive zone, and his work in his own zone. I mean, his gaps are better. All the things we talk about, and Tripp has mentioned numerous times that he's much quicker going to the puck, and I think you have to think it's because he's learned the system a lot better now. He's not thinking everything like, where do I go? What do I do? How do I play this? And so I think, interestingly enough, I mean, he's second on the Canes in plus minus at plus 13. That's not bad. And he's second in rookie defenseman scoring. I mean, he's behind Matthew Schaefer. So, okay. So he's having just a tremendous season. But, when I look at the Blue, though, the question I've been asking has been around Jacob Slavin. Sometimes I think he's the Jacob we know and love, and other times I see him do things which kind of surprise me. Aaron, what are you seeing with Jacob Slavin right now?
I just think that it's been a tough year from the injury perspective. And, I don't think any of us failed to cheer very loudly for that overtime game winner, because that was fantastic to see him get his first goal of the season in such a critical moment of the game. That was fantastic to see. I'm sure you could tell how happy all the guys are for him with that. That was a great thing. I think that it's just hard when you come back from missing a lot of games due to injury. I think speed-wise, people have looked at the edge stats. He's not 100% up to his normal speed, and that's going to impact because of how Slavin defends. He's not the big physical defenseman, bodying people off the puck in the corner. He's, a guy who uses his skating and his speed and his edge work and his stick positioning and all the rest of it to have the impact that he does. So you take one of those elements in the speed and you reduce it just a little bit. It doesn't even have to be a major reduction, because he's coming back from an injury that impacted his ability to get there. And I think you're going to see what we've been seeing. There's some games where he looks exactly like you said. This is the Jacob Slavin who was at the Olympics. This is the Jacob Slavin who was in Four Nations last year. That was such a Slavin play. We always say it. We hear Tripp talk about it. But then there have been those times in games when he's just not able to get there and to stop something from happening that normally we would say, well, Slavin's got this, and then he doesn't. So I don't think that has anything to do with anything other than, I mean, I heard somebody try to bring up the age, related regression stuff, and I'm like, no, he's way too young for that. Don't even start with that. There's no way that his age is impacting his game. He's just not 100% from, I mean, I think they said last night was his, 38th game of the season. So that's not
38th game.
Yeah, that's not, you're not even, he hasn't even played half a season. So I think that's what you're seeing when somebody's coming back from a significant injury that unfortunately impacted him a lot more than I think they were thinking it was going to at the beginning of the year. So I think that we will see that turn back on in the playoffs, especially the longer they go and the deeper they go, because he's looked better to me as time has gone on. He's not, it's not the same thing all the time. So I'm hopeful that he's pretty close to being 100%.
Well, he's going to be key. Shane, what are your thoughts on Jacob Slavin and Alex Nikishin?
Well, I think for Slavin, I agree. I mean, only playing 38 games, and when you look at the schedule that he's been thrown into, with it being condensed, coming back from injury, you actually
Oh,
want to practice more than the guys who are playing all the time. And I can tell you, being around the team, they don't practice very often. I mean, they may morning
Right.
skate to get the legs going, but practice has been out the window with playing every other day with the Olympic break. All that stuff has been just for a guy coming out of an injury like Jacob Slavin had, he just hasn't had the reps, if you will. So I'm kind of
Right.
encouraged as we get to the playoffs because you have a 4 game stretch here to finish the season. Then the Hurricanes will have 4 days, maybe 5 days before they even start on the weekend,
Right.
with the luxury to get some practice time in with the rest. So obviously Jacob Slavin is who he is. I mean, he's going to be elite level no matter what. I'm not worried if he's scoring goals left and right.
Oh,
And I think the injury and time off has had a huge effect on where he is today, but I'm not worried in the least a little bit for Alex Nikishin. I've loved the progress the young man has made. And I think
yeah.
I didn't like the hype coming in. I think just for any young player, I'm like, this guy's, I mean, we're putting him in a spot just to fail, right? To say he's got to do this, this, and this offensively. He was set up for failure from the start when people are like, oh, well, what's wrong? And then they're like, oh, they're not playing enough. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, let's this kid develop, you know? The biggest word to me with any young player is development. And he's having to develop at the highest rate of speed because he's not even going to Chicago. And now
Right.
from game one to now, he's a much better NHL player. Hands
Yeah.
down, he has made the progression steps you want to. Now, at the same time, I don't think we're at his ceiling yet because I think he has more to give when it comes to the physicality area, the goal scoring, all of those things. But I think what he's developed over from game one to now is understanding the system and reading the game and being able to keep with the tempo of the game. Because early in the season, when it was going around our own zone, you could see him chasing a little bit and his
Yeah.
head was turning
Yeah.
left and right saying, where do I go next? And now he knows where he's going and he gets there before he needs to be there. So that's what you want to see from young players over a season is how they continue to thrive and become better players in the National Hockey League. And Alex Nikishin is doing that right now.
The other thing too, I mean, we've talked about this too. I mean, he's learning the language now. He can communicate a lot better. He's feeling much more comfortable in his environment. I guess he knows where the Harris Teeter is, and so on and so forth. So, I think, I think, I think for Alex, it's a lot better situation. And
Well, and I was just going to say I didn't understand the comfort level piece for Europeans coming over until I went to Europe and played
oh,
over there
okay,
and was one of 3 Americans on the team. And you're trying to adjust and get your family settled into a culture and an environment where you can't talk to anybody.
right,
I underrated that factor of guys coming to America. And I agree with you that now that he's been here long enough, he's now settled in to a place, you know, he's one of the guys, he can speak to people, he can get around the city by himself. And that is a huge factor into where a guy plays well. And, you know, as we're going to get into the forwards, I'm sure we're going to talk about this guy too, but Taylor Hall has talked about that over the past couple of weeks, how comfortable he feels here in a
yes,
Hurricanes jersey. And that leads to playing really good hockey.
yeah, yeah. I mean, they go out and all they want to do is just make it happen, get out there and play, and that's a good segue, I think, Shane, to talk about the forward crew. And boy, if there's one area that you really have to be excited with this Hurricanes team, is the forward group. They have done something I don't remember when since I've been watching the Canes, is they've moved up to actually second in the NHL in goal scoring. I mean, this is insane. I don't remember them being that high. And I might have a short memory, but boy, that's impressive. And they've got 281 goals. There's only one team, and that's your team, Katie. They've got 290. Not surprising. Um, so they're scoring goals like crazy. And we look at some of these victories, and they're scoring 5, 6 goals, whatever it takes to get the win, and that's impressive. And there's the interesting thing I found is, of course, it's balanced right across the team. You've got 5 20+ goal scorers. You've got 8 players with over 17 goals. That's impressive.
It's exactly where you want to be. We talk about depth all the time. You have to have more than one line. The Hurricanes have 3 and sometimes 4 lines that can put the puck in the back of the net. And when I look over the past couple of years, whenever we do a roundup when the season's over, and we've already talked about the goalies, right? Everyone wants to say, well, we didn't get the goaltending this year. I'm like, You scored one goal.
Yeah.
You're not going to win, right? You scored one goal in 2 of the games against the Florida Panthers. You're not going to win. So now that you have that scoring, you can argue the fact if you lose 6-5, now we can talk about the goalie. But if you're still losing 3-1, we can't blame the goalie for only scoring once. And so now you have the depth, the Aho line with Svech and Jarvis. The Stankoven line is red hot. Stahl Martinuk and where Ehlers has found a home with the 2 veterans. And then the Jankowski line that chips in every now and then, but is playing such a physical game and creating those chances. You have the balance and absolute depth that you need to really scare teams. Whether you're at home and getting every matchup you want, or even on the road, the other coach is still looking. He's like, well, who do I want to match up against? Because they have 4 lines that could probably put in the back of my net. And I think that's something that a lot of coaches do not have the luxury that Rob Brind'Amour has, is to send 4 different groups over the boards that can score. Some teams are just buying time. Yeah, create some pressure, create some chances. Perfect example, in my opinion, because everyone was worried when the Canes left Montreal. They're like, oh, Montreal looks so good. Well, Montreal is one dimension.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I'll give them a second dimension that their goalie's really good. But they have one line. There is no chance the Montreal Canadiens beats the Hurricanes in a 7-game series. You just can't sustain that with one line with what the Hurricanes have, in my opinion. And the numbers would go to show that. And, we can't gamble here, but you guys might be able to. I would go against Montreal all day of the week with one line.
Yeah, and that's the challenge that teams like the Oilers and other teams have had, in recent years, where you've got, a group of players that are outstanding, but it's your depth beyond that. And, we remember back to, Tampa with John Cooper's teams with 4 lines he could roll. And those lines made the difference. And quite often it's those 3rd and 4th lines, as we know, that, we talk about Jordan Martinook, he's on the 2nd line, I guess. But, guys like Jordan Martinook coming up big in the playoffs. And that's what we expect to see again. Katie, what are you seeing with the Aho line?
I'm seeing a line that Brind'Amour has a great luxury with this year because, first of all, they know each other. This is not the first time they have been together. They had great success last playoffs when the 3 of them worked together, and Svech had his postseason coming out. Maybe not coming out, but resurgence, let's say, from before. And so he's obviously got a lot of great offensive weapons on that line. The playmaking, the finishing, the size and physicality from Svech, the elusiveness from the others. It's just a trio that meld and play off of each other well and bring out the best in each other, which is also very important. But beyond just those offensive skills and abilities, this line is really good defensively. And so we have seen more and more, even at home, Brind'Amour has chosen to match the Aho line against the other team's top line rather than the Stahl line. And that has created some matchup advantages for him down the lineup when he's able to trust that line not only to go out and score, but also to shut down or frustrate or interfere with the other team's top line's ability to score. And that's where what Shane said came in, is over a 7-game series, if the Aho line is matched up against Caulfield and company, do you trust that, that line will still produce, maybe not as high as if they had another matchup, but because of the other side of the coin where they would get into a rhythm and hopefully prevent that Caulfield line from scoring as much. Let's not kid ourselves, that line will still score, but not score as much, not do as much damage, then it is a bigger net positive for the Canes overall. So that's the trend that I'm particularly excited about to see, is in the 200-foot game and chess matchup that Brind'Amour can play with that line.
Yeah, and you talk about Svechnikov. He's had a great offensive season. I mean, he's tied a season high of 69 points. He's got the same 30 goals, 39 assists, and he's been on a tear. But he's been doing some great defensive work. I mean, how many times have we seen him come back and make outstanding defensive plays? And you're going, wow, this is really incredible, because you're used to, Seth Jarvis and Sebastian Aho doing that kind of work, but now he's drinking the Kool-Aid defensively as well. Logan Stankoven's line has been a thrill. Aaron?
It has been. They've been so hot down the stretch. It's been just incredible. You're counting on them for a goal every night, one way or another, either on the power play or at 5-on-5. And I know 5-on-5 has been a little bit lower, but it's starting to creep back up again too. And I mean, we've talked a lot. I know we've all talked a lot about Taylor Hall, his role on that line, how important he is as the mentor to that line. We've talked about Stankoven having a great first season as the 2C in that line. Or whatever number we want to call it. I know we don't number the lines here, yeah. But the player I really want to focus on is Jackson Blake, because I honestly thought that this might be a tougher year for Jackson Blake, given that, the sophomore slump can be a very real thing. He was up and down in the lineup in his first year. I didn't know 100%. And then his playoffs were a bit tough on him too. So I wasn't sure how quickly he would settle in and how well he would produce. And he has exceeded my wildest expectations as a scorer on that line, and just you see him continuing to do things out there that, you don't see typically on the Hurricanes, when he makes some of those moves and gets in close to the net and everything else. And, that needs to keep happening. I think that he's been a bigger factor on that line than a lot of people even realize, because so much of the attention has been on Hall and Stankoven. But without Blake, that line isn't working either. So it's been fun to watch them. And, they're young. They have all that energy and enthusiasm too. So, and then, Taylor Hall, I think all three of them are really necessary to that line, because I don't think it's the same line without Hall either. They need that bigger physical presence, and then that the mental, the maturity and the stability to keep them grounded. And I think that we saw a little bit of that last night. It seemed like in the first period there was a little bit of hesitancy on that line as they were, coming out against the Bruins to begin with, but not too many shifts with Hall kind of calming things down, and they were right back to business. So they've been so fun to watch.
Well, Shane, Logan Stankoven, I mean, we've debated this all year. We were trying at the trade deadline to find another centerman. We had all kinds that were on the list, of course. And we kept thinking, oh boy, we can't go into the playoffs with Logan. He has been just an incredible story. What are you seeing with Logan Stankoven?
I was probably the one person that was on Team Rod when everyone said, oh, go find. And I always just went back to everybody who asked the question. I'm like, well, who's your guy? Who are you going to go get that is that many steps ahead of Logan Stankoven that you're going to be like, oh, and to me, there's never really an answer in a trade deadline move anyways, that you don't have to spend the farm on to get a guy back in.
Yeah.
Would I have loved to have Vincent Trocheck back here? Sure. But for the price they were asking, no thanks. Because you're going to buckle yourself for years to come. Every team, and I talked with Mike about this the other day, which team that made a move is blowing people out of the water? Right? Yeah. Kadri was a great add to Avalanche, but he hasn't been helping them blow people out of the water, right? Lost to St. Louis 2 nights ago. They beat them last night 3-1. Buffalo's been stronger, I think, defensively with the pieces they've added. But other than that, any of the moves, I'm not blown away saying, well, wish we would have done that.
Yeah.
This team just continues to kind of chug along. And I think familiarity with each other, I think the chemistry between Blake and Stankoven and kind of the tight-knit friendship that they have has helped them. But Logan Stankoven is an absolute student of the game. And when you watch this guy in practice, how hard he works, how much he's in Rod Brind'Amour's ear after, working on faceoffs constantly, and he knows what's being said about him. I mean, as a player, you're reading the media, right? You can see everything. He's on a mission to prove people wrong. And for a long time, prove people wrong that he's the number 2 guy, that he can be, very similar to what Rod Brind'Amour did, the way he plays defensive hockey, the way he creates goals. And I've been saying on the last few games, everyone's like, wow, his size might be a problem. Every one of his goals have been dead center in the middle of the net, where he's getting pushed around and he's finding rebounds to score goals. So to me, the game has changed, and the size thing isn't going to be an issue because of how well these 2 guys skate. And I speak of Blake and Stankoven. Taylor Hall skates well too.
Yes.
And the way they pursue pucks in the offensive zone to create turnovers, I mean, if I was a defending player, they're almost like Nap, and they never leave you alone. Just buzzing nonstop, lifting your stick, poking pucks away, and they never go away. Like Zadorov last night looked so annoyed because these guys are just buzzing around. He can't keep up to them. They keep stripping pucks off them, and they're almost too quick to catch. And then we talk about size, and I love it that it got to this point, and I just shove it in people's face, because 2 games ago at home, when the Hurricanes are playing, now I forget who we're playing. The Islanders.
Oh, the Islanders. Sorry.
No, the Islanders.
Yeah, the Islanders. Yeah, sorry.
Logan Stankoven's going to the corner with Scott Mayfield, who's 6'5", right?
Yeah.
222, engages early, pushes him off the puck, takes it, passes his good buddy, and it's in the back of the net. So please tell me what the problem is with his side. Don't seem to have one. So, I love it that Logan Stankoven is, showing people that I'm your guy, and I think our fans are in love with this guy. And are you always looking to add in pieces? Sure. But I go back to the trade deadline. You cannot give up pieces in your roster and become better. If you give up 2 pieces in your roster and you get 1 guy back, you have not gotten any better. And the Hurricanes stuck with their plan. They looked at things and they just, didn't make those moves. And they still continue to show people we're the best team in the East. We're at top. We didn't need a piece. And so time will tell, because the playoffs are always a new schedule, right? Everything's at zeros, and everyone's got the same thing going for them. So it's a matter of who survives round 1 and round 2, who remains healthy, who gets a hot goalie. And then what I love about the playoffs, in any given league, there's always a story that no one expects. There's always a guy who jumps out of the fog and is like, who is this guy? Just scored 2 overtime winners. They won a series. And that's your story for the round. So I'm excited for the playoffs. I'm excited where this team sits. And the Stankoven line with Hall and Blake are an elite level second line right now for Rod Brind'Amour.
Well, they are. And I mean, Stankoven has 5 goals and assists in his last 5 games. I mean, he's just been on a tear. And you're right. He scores his goals in the tough areas. He loves to go in there. He loves to be around the net. And the other thing I've seen with Logan is, I mean, obviously teams are trying to crush him. They're all going after him. And he just bounces off and goes again, and even gets knocked down, and away he goes. So he's a guy that he's got great skill. We knew he could score. I mean, when he came to the Canes, I mean, his history has been as a top scorer everywhere he's been. So, we knew that. And he's got a fantastic attitude. So, when you think about that move with Rantanen going to Dallas and us getting Stankoven, I just feel like the person Stankoven is the whole story here. He's just such a great guy, and you see it in his demeanor and you see it in his play. So it's great to see. And Taylor Hall is a bit of a he's getting a resurgence this year. He had a number of tough seasons, as we recall. Injuries really kind of shackled him. He played with the Hawks for a year. I don't think he was too keen. He comes over here, he's got a new lease on life, and he's playing great hockey. There's no question. He makes a lot of plays that remind me of the days when he was doing that with the Devils and even the Oilers. So that's exciting. Katie, what about Nikolai Ehlers on the Stahl line? Isn't that a story?
It's been a fantastic story, and I think if you had told most fans at the beginning of the season that this was the line he was going to end up on, there would have been an outcry of horror, because we brought him in. He's supposed to play with Aho. He's supposed to create all this offense. He's supposed to get him away from the Winnipeg Jets system that he was dissatisfied with. But it has been a perfect fit. Apparently even Paul Stastny saw that. And, my former Av, who also played with the Hurricanes, he should have those great insights on this sort of thing. And it has been good to see how well Ehlers has provided that particular offensive edge to that line, because the Jordans create so much more space in which he can operate. And he has done a fantastic job in balancing out using his pass and his shot on that line, because if he gets too pass happy, then teams can cheat on him. If he gets too shot happy, same thing. But he's really balanced it out well and found that extra level when it comes to working with that particular duo. In fact, I would say he's had more success working with that duo than Jarvis or Svetch when Brind'Amour has chosen to try and get the same kind of results with them on that line. And it's great to have that as well. And Ehlers hasn't given up much on the defensive end either.
No.
It doesn't feel like Stahl and Martinook are having to cover for him back in the defensive zone or make up for having him on that line. He is carrying his weight there as well, which, like I mentioned with Aho's line, is a less tangible contribution that he is making, but important and valuable nonetheless. In fact, if you look at his, going back to the offensive zone, if you look at his hockey viz chart, part of what makes him so effective is that his shots on goal are coming from everywhere in the zone. He is not just concentrated on one area of the ice. He is a threat everywhere, from goal line to blue line, from left to right, center, perimeter. It doesn't matter. Ehlers is providing a scoring threat for the Canes when he is on the ice.
Yeah, and the thing about Nikolai Ehlers that I see is he can create something out of nothing. Like, he's a guy that can take the puck from his own zone. He can get into the O zone, and he doesn't give the puck away easily. He's not a guy that rushes in and quickly passes it away. He's surveying the ice. He sees the ice very, very well. And we've seen him score some of those goals where he kind of circles around and ends up at the blue line. Next thing you know, it's in the net. So he's a guy that can really drive offense. And he has helped one of his line mates have a pretty darn good season. Aaron, Jordan Stahl with 19 goals.
Yeah, we're waiting for Stahl goal number 20. I've got 4 games left to do it. I mean, wouldn't that be a great way to end the season on a high note with Stahl becoming a scorer? And I think that we'll probably touch on that coming up. But he's had the offensive touch, and having Ehlers on that line is going to give those opportunities, because there's a lot of, when you have somebody like that who can, like Katie said, shoot from anywhere and score from anywhere, you also have a guy who's going to be creating some nice little net front rebounds, and when Stahl's out there providing that net front, there's going to be some goals going in, wherever they may end up bouncing in off of. So that's been a fun thing to see too. So.
Yeah, it would be incredible if he has 20 goals. How many years? It's several years. It's like, I don't know, 8 years or whatever number of years since he had 20 goals, whatever it is. I wanted to bring up the fourth line because you mentioned this, Shane, and I'm not quite on the same page as you. I've got concerns for the fourth line. I know their job is to be a heavy line for sure. I was kind of excited when Nicolas Delorier was in, called the Bash Brothers, him and Carrier, shaking things up in the ozone. I haven't been as excited with Eric Robinson lately since he came back from injury. I think he's still struggling a bit with that. That line has really dried up offensively. And historically in the playoffs, the fourth line has to be a heavy line for you, but they do have to deliver some offense. What are you thinking with this fourth line? Are they going to be able to get it done?
I do think they're going to be able to get it done. And I think I agree with you that Eric Robinson's still dealing with some nagging issues that hopefully these next few days, allows him to rest and prepare. I think his speed in the playoffs is going to be very much needed. Yeah. I also think, the toughness of Nick Delorier, just William Carrier running around and having a presence can be a huge factor, and you can get enough scoring from your top lines. I'm not concerned enough to say, the amount of scoring they were going to do is dried up where it's going to have an effect on this team. I think their physicality, Jankowski being able to kill penalties. Obviously Robinson, when he's in the lineup killing penalties, is a big deal. Moving forward, obviously you got to look to Jankowski to be winning faceoffs inside the faceoff circle is going to be another huge factor for me. But I just love the way William Carrier is playing now. Is probably the best I've seen him play since being a Carolina Hurricane.
Right.
The physical presence he's had, the creating chances. He scores a big goal last night when he's on the ice with Stahl and Martinook. So it's moving in the right direction. I don't have a concern with where they are. I think that's the type of game you need in the playoffs, just from a sheer momentum shift sometimes. And I think all those players kind of fit the bill perfectly. And there's always secret weapons if you need to add something on a fourth line, like a Bradley Nadeau. You just need some goals around. I mean, there's assets that, if things are dried up and you think you need more goals from that line, you have ways to utilize maybe some useful talent in a situation where they see no pressure, they see no stress, and they just jump into a lineup and kind of get things flowing in the right direction.
Well, I certainly was drinking the Kool-Aid of Nicolas Delorier after the Islander game. He had 9 hits, and I don't remember a Kane having 9. It's actually the top this year is Melanson with the Seattle Kraken, who had 12. So if the other lines are scoring the way they have up until now, all these guys have to do is be a heavy force. I wanted to spend a minute on special teams. I think this is a story that is worth certainly spending time on. They have this 100 rule, which is the combination of your penalty kill numbers along with your power play numbers. The Canes are combined 104.8%. And I know Tripp talks about this a lot and says anything over 100% is outstanding. The power play has been ridiculous. I mean, it's been insane. Did you see this coming, Shane?
I don't know if I saw it coming. I was hopeful. I thought they would. I thought they definitely had the talent to get where it needed to be. The start of the year, it wasn't there. And you guys were talking about Nikolai Ehlers a few moments ago, and he, to me, is the straw that stirs the drink, right? I think having him to the flank, you have Ghost at the top. You obviously had time without Ghost. Nikishin utilizes the big shot, which gives you different looks. But to me, Nikolai Ehlers has been the guy to really ignite the power play. Because I think a lot of people overlook the fact that he plays on both.
Yeah.
Right? If Jordan Staal immediately loses the faceoff and comes off, Ehlers comes on, and he never comes off the ice again with the second unit coming over the board. He is the guy moving pucks around. He changes the different looks. He loves getting in motion all over the offensive zone. And he's a big reason in my mind that the power play is flipping where it is. Now, I also agree with Rod when he talks about it. He's like, we were getting chances. This wasn't going in. And now there is a caveat to the puck is going in now. It's just the way it goes in sport. You can't really explain it. You could have point blank range and, you're getting robbed night after night and all of a sudden everything starts going in. And that's kind of where it is now. I mean, Andrei Svechnikov scores on a ricochet off a foot last night. You have to get bounces. The puck has to find the back of the net. But the power play was never a doubt. The talent was there. It's just a matter of when it starts to clip in the right direction. And the good news for Rod Brind'Amour, it's red hot right now as you get closer to the playoffs, and it's something you're going to need because defense in the playoffs is what wins championships. So 5-on-5, things are tight as a drum. Your power play has to be effective, and it has to get you a goal on a nightly basis to help you win games in the playoffs.
And that's been a challenge for the Canes in recent years. The power play has dried up. Teams have been able to focus in on the top lines and shut them down. And as you say, it's really tough defensive struggles. And getting special teams, I think and Rod's talked about this a lot, special teams are really the difference. You've got to kill those penalties, and then you've got to score in your power plays. But, their numbers are gaudy. I mean, they're ridiculous. Since January 1st, 31.6%, obviously number one. I mean, it's insane numbers. Shane, the three of us were pulling our hair out in November and December. I mean, literally. I mean, they were sitting at 30th, 13.7% on December 5th. And we did a podcast around that time, and we were just going nuts. What are we going to do? This is insane.
And the funny thing is, Rod, nothing's really changed besides he puts Jordan Staal on the ice to win faceoffs, which was a big factor. They were losing a ton of faceoffs early in the season. So now you have puck possession. Staal in front of the net, I think, is a huge part as well. Besides Ehlers, I think just having that body around the front of the net, because before it was Staal, it was Svech. And I'm like, well, I don't want Svech there. He's my shooter.
No.
But so if Svech veers off to the side, now you're just in a U shape, just shooting pucks at a goalie who sees everything. Yes. So putting Jordan Staal there is a big help. The puck movement has gotten much better. I always used to say this at the start of the year when it wasn't going well, like, you have to fire a pass through the seam. I said, even if it's not to a shot, a pass somewhere has to break down the box and goes through the seam to force these guys to start chasing. Then you have them on the run and you can capitalize. I think they're more dynamic now with the number of different looks they have. And you can see, no different than whether it's any sport or really any job, when someone is on their game, everything looks easier. And they're a step ahead. They move it around the top as quickly. If they got a shot, they're taking it. But if it's not there, they already know we have the down play coming next where we can get it down low and roll off the goal line. So they're just a step ahead right now. And when you're feeling that kind of mojo, 31%, you're rolling in the right direction. And every time you see the ref's arm go up, those guys just, kind of start salivating on the bench saying, here we go again. Let's get another one in the back of the net. So You want to keep this rhythm going. You don't want to have any bumps in the road these last 4 games. If there's one area, right, you're taking guys in a lineup, whether they're resting or if they're injured, the power play is something you want to keep hammering for
Yes.
4 games. You want to keep driving nails into and making sure that is where you want it to be when the playoffs begin.
Yeah, and one of the things we talked about was this whole question of zone entry. For a long time, of course, Marty Necas was the magic man. He'd carry the puck up, get it in the zone, and you've got him. Of course, you're smiling, Katie, because he does it with the Avalanche. But he was outstanding, and when he left, I mean, that was a big hole. All of a sudden, you got 2 guys that can do it, and Nikolai Ehlers and Logan Stankoven they're both outstanding at getting that puck into the offensive zone and setting up. And I think that's a huge difference because even if they lose the face off, the draw, and it goes back in their own zone, they're coming up and they're getting into the zone and getting set up. And this was an area I think they had a lot of trouble with early in the season. So that's fantastic. And boy, oh boy, every time they get out on the power play, we're just wondering, are they going to pot another one? It's insane. Now, the penalty kill has not been quite the same. And we talked earlier about the fact that, of course, early parts of the season without Jacob Slavin, who has been the, incredible defensive guy on the PK, missing him was huge. Katie, what are you seeing with the PK right now?
I think the PK is doing fine. I wouldn't go much above or below that. They are doing what they do best as far as denying zone entries and not allowing other teams to get set up. Where they get themselves in trouble are those few times where they try to clear the zone, the other team gets control, and before they can get back into their structure, into their system, the other team manages to get one behind Freddie or Bussi.
Yeah.
But I think it's encouraging that they are having that kind of success when they're denying the zone entries, because that's going to be key come playoff time. And because they are such a threat going the other way, they have scored so many shorthanded goals, especially of late. And it's come from Aho and Jarvis, but not just Aho and Jarvis. It's been coming from other sources as well. And so that has to be in the back of the minds of the opposing power play, because they know they have to be perfect with the puck, because if they make one bobble or one other miscue, then it is going to be rammed down their throat in the other direction with a high likelihood of going in the back of their own net. And so I think those 2 particular qualities of the PK are what have me most encouraged moving forward.
Aaron, what do you think they have to do to get back to the level of PK that we had for so many seasons?
Well, I think that you have to look at, and I'm going to throw some flowers at a player that I wasn't all that kind to when he was here. But, I know Katie's got Brett Burns on their team now, and Burns was really good on the penalty kill. That is something that he's adapted to in his game as he's gotten to be an older player. I don't know if he's still on the penalty kill in Colorado right now, Katie. I haven't been watching, but he has been good. So sometimes when you lose someone like that, then you restructure the units and you have different people playing in some of those roles, it just takes a little time to figure that all out and find it. And I would say back at the early part of the season, when that should have been happening, it wasn't happening because the defensive core was so injured. So you were putting different defensemen on the PK all of the time. And so that makes it very hard when you finally do establish these are my units, and this is the extra group that can come in when one of these guys is in the box. I mean, I don't think the Canes even got to that point until probably shortly before the Olympic break, when Jacob Slavin started playing games again. So I mean, you can't really expect a penalty kill to be humming along at perfect level when you don't even have the same defensive groups out there all the time. You're going to have your defensemen with your forwards on the PK, and you didn't have the same ones. They weren't building chemistry. They weren't getting that communication strategy down, until relatively late in the season. So I don't know how the numbers look just since a certain point. I haven't really looked at that. I know they did go through a little bit of a dip there, when they were really struggling. But I think a lot of it was just getting to where, okay, these are our PK guys, and and we're going to use them pretty much exclusively, unless one of them's in the box. Normally that would be the first month of the season, it would all be figured out, but with so many injuries on the blue line, you didn't have the luxury of building those pairs early on.
Yeah, and we talked about. I mean, last year's decor was a heavy decor
Hmm.
in their zone. I mean, you had Slavin and you had Burns, and then you had Orlov and you had Chatfield. And
Hmm.
these guys, they really looked after, keeping people pushed out of the way and clearing the in front of the net and so on. And I think that's been a bit of a challenge because a bit of a different decor now. Particularly when you've got Walker and K. Miller. Miller, he's a master with his stick. He's not a guy that generally does a lot of heavy lifting. And I think the same with, Walker. He hits anything, but he can be pushed around too. So they're a little bit different, and I think that's certainly affected the PK as the season has gone on. But I think you're right too, Aaron. It's just getting everybody in, getting them seated, giving them a chance to kind of feel comfortable with each other in the PK situation. I don't know. How do you feel about it, Shane? What are your thoughts on the PK?
Well, I agree. Early on in the season, you're missing Jacob Slavin, which is a massive hole. I also think you talk about Keandre Miller and Alex Nikishin. This penalty kill system is extremely difficult, and you have
Yeah.
two new guys that are just thrown into the mix because Shane Gostisbehere doesn't kill a lot of
No.
penalties. So now you have two new guys out there, and if it's off, if you're a step off, it looks like it did at the start of the season. But when it's on, it's one of the most effective. I think they do such a good job of not allowing entries, something you talked about where the power play was so good, Tom. Denying entries is, penalty kill does a tremendous job, but in zone, creating the pressure, creating turnovers and getting it down the ice. I also think the big reason a lot of people talked about Kokiniemi, oh, he should play here, he should play here. But a big reason why I'm on the side of Rod and when he leaves Jankowski in, because he kills penalties. And I think it's so much more effective when you can have three sets of forwards coming over the boards. Early in the season, it was only four guys. And I think that took a lot of juice out of the guys' power
Yeah.
play 5-on-5 when they're coming out of it. When you're only rolling four guys nonstop and you're in penalty trouble, it is extremely taxing. So just adding Jankowski and Robinson to the mix alleviates that type of pressure, allows your lines to come back 5-on-5 intact and
Okay.
fresh. And I think it's been a huge asset. Obviously, getting Jacob Slavin back is, you know,
Yeah.
a wish of any team when you come into the second half of the season, going to the playoffs, and the penalty kill continues to clip along. But, the one area too, if you ask any coach, who's got to be your best penalty killer? And it's the goalie.
Chigoli.
And I think
Yep.
that's, where people are going to talk about it. Wow, could have used a save right there, right? And that's not every night. It's not pointing fingers at the goalies. When you don't have an extra guy and there is that breakdown or they make a great play, that's when you need that save. And we've had it and we
Yeah.
haven't had it. And I
Yeah.
think that's affected the percentage sometimes on the penalty kill as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, early in the season, Brandon Bussi was making those saves, and you just sit there and go, "You got to be kidding! Those are incredible saves." And now we're seeing some of those go in, and that's back to we talked about Freddie Andersen in the playoffs, and he played very very well, but then he let one in, a soft one. He should have had that, whatever the case may be, and all of a sudden the Canes are in trouble. So that's something we're going to be hoping that doesn't rear its ugly head as we head into the playoffs for sure. As we look ahead, big question. They got 4 games now. They're on the road. What do they do? Do they go for the highest possible position? Like, do they try to end up just behind Colorado and have home ice advantage for virtually everybody but Colorado if they get there? Or do they rest players? Do they call some folks up from Chicago? Do they just decide, hey, we'll put in some of the guys that have been sitting out? What are we thinking about this? Why don't you kick it off, Shane?
Well, I'm not in these conversations in the locker room, number one, but my first conversation with Rod Brind'Amour, if I was him, would be with the trainers and say, where are guys at? What do they
Yeah.
need to be? Because I want 100%, 10 days from now. And that's how I'm making my decision. I think even if you're not pulling out 6 guys, that's not happening. But
No.
if you need to take a couple guys out here and there, you still have the full ability to beat the Chicago Blackhawks without a doubt. Then
Yeah.
you're going to face 3 teams that are scratching and clawing. So can you get a position where you scratch a couple points out to where Buffalo and Tampa can't catch? So you just solidify it. But in my opinion, my 100% thing is health over first place in the East, because first place only in the East only matters if all the top teams win,
Yes,
right?
exactly.
If you're not going to catch Colorado, Well, what if they lose? Then you're sitting in a good place anyway. Health to me is the most important thing. I'm not playing a guy in a back-to-back in Philadelphia and the Islanders if he's dealing with something. I need him 5 days from now. You're
Yeah.
really having those conversations with your trainers to make sure your team is ready to go when the playoffs start. I can also tell you, these guys are going out to win every game. They're not stepping into Chicago being like, oh, let's just get through this 60 and go fly to Utah. They're professionals. They're going to go all out to win each and every game, to make sure they're doing it right, because that's the other piece. You don't want to take 2 weeks off of your game and think you can get up to speed when the playoffs start. These guys need to be going. I would love to see the full lineup against the Islanders and utilize these first 3 if you need to pull guys in and out, just so your team is ready when the playoffs begin.
Yeah. Well, Katie, when you look at the 4 road games, what do you feel the Canes are going to need to do to end up in first place in the East?
Like Shane said, I definitely think taking that first one in Chicago is a must. There's no reason, even if they do sub a couple of guys in, that they shouldn't be able to win that if they are playing at least their B game. And Utah is pretty much locked into their spot. They're not going anywhere. They're far away from Minnesota. They can't catch Minnesota for third in the Central, and nobody's catching them for the first wild card. So, they that should be a very winnable game as well. And then you just have to see what Tampa and Buffalo have done and go from there. I think there's a good chance that they could get first in the East, but if they don't, it's like Shane mentioned, it's not that big a deal until you get to the Eastern Conference Final. And as we saw, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the Canes had home ice advantage against the Panthers last year in the Eastern Conference Final. Mm-hmm. And they didn't have Chatfield and Walker.
Yes.
So there's a lot of debate. Would that series have turned out differently if they had been healthy?
No.
I think we all definitely think it would have been a much more competitive series if they had Chatfield and Walker instead of Morrow and Nikishin in that position. So I'm definitely it'd be great to have first in the East, but more important to go in with a full healthy lineup, because you never know what's going to happen after that. And the healthier they can be, the more likely that they'll go deep this season.
Aaron, what do you think about the importance of home ice advantage?
Well, I had an interesting little comment. I asked this question out on Twitter yesterday, and I got a comment this morning from Todd Gibson of WCAN, and he said he'd talked to Rod, and he'd asked him pretty much that question. And Rod said his preference would be to have fewer practices, shorter practices, an optional like what he did today, and keep things pretty much rolling. That doesn't mean he won't rest a couple guys. According to what Todd repeated, he said, that he's certainly open to doing that, but that's not how he's seeing this as a priority, like, to go in and ice a Wolves roster, or against Chicago. I mean, I honestly think that, and I'm biased, but I think the Chicago Wolves could give the Chicago Blackhawks a pretty good run for their money right now, but but that's just, being a little bit of a homer there. But yeah, as far as you're not going to start doing that using all your emergency call-ups and everything, because they're battling for the playoffs too. So that's not something you want to do. But yeah, it does make sense for them to rest some guys along the stretch, and the two that I most hope will get maybe a consideration as far as forwards. Defense, it may be down to whether, for instance, if Chatfield could really use a game or two off, if even if he's not super injured and all that. But you don't want to aggravate something if there's something that happens. So give him the extra time. Why not? You have the ability to do that. You've got Mike Riley. So, but if you have any forwards at all, I would like to see the possibility, depending on how things go and where they are, of Sebastian Aho and Seth Jarvis, and it's just because of the sheer number of games those two have played. Yeah. The sheer amount of hockey that they have played this year with all the extra games in the Olympics. And I think that getting them a couple of extra games, especially Jarvis after that hit he took from Zadorov last night, and I know he was fine, but that's not a fun thing to be, taking right there. So, let them maybe get a little bit of time to rest those bumps and bruises. I think that we'll see them. I mean, they've already been playing really well, but I think we'll see them hit another level if they get a little bit of rest. So as it progresses, maybe in the game against Chicago, or maybe by the time they get to the Flyers game, if they've already got home ice advantage, if they've already managed between a combination of their wins and everybody else's losses. And one thing I keep reminding people is that Buffalo, Tampa, and Montreal being the three teams that are at 102, Tampa and Montreal play each other Thursday, so they can't both come out of that game with the full number of points. One of them may come out of that game exactly with where they are at 102. The worst case scenario for the Canes would be for them to kick that game to overtime, because then everybody gets at least something.
Exactly.
But,
we don't want that.
but if somebody wins that game in regulation, then you've got one team that's that much further below where the Canes will be. So I think that as all that transpires and as all that unfolds, they're going to make these decisions on the fly. And I agree with you, Shane. Rest is important.
Well, interesting.
Montreal also goes to New York to play the Islanders, a desperate Islanders team that needs to win out.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly. Well, interesting. You mentioned the Chicago Blackhawks being a possible opportunity for the Chicago Wolves. Well, interestingly enough, of course, the Blackhawks have several players that they brought up through the season from Rockford, and Chicago's done very well against Rockford as well. So, yeah, that's a good story. Okay, so closing thoughts, just a few thoughts as we look ahead to finishing the season and getting prepared for the playoffs. Shane, why don't you kick it off?
Just excitement. I think this team has been so impressive all season long in the way they play. And when this team is on and you go to the Islanders game, you give up 2 shots in the first period, 4 shots in the second period, 6 shots total going to a third period. It really blows my mind how much they suppress teams with creating opportunities in the offensive zone. And I'm excited for the playoffs to get here. I want to see an exciting last 4 games, obviously. Sitting atop the East would be a great feat. But as we hear from the players in the locker room all the time, that hasn't been our goal all season long. And everyone knows what their goal is. And I think this team is primed and will be extremely healthy when we get to the playoffs and ready to kind of shake off, if you will, the kryptonite of the Florida Panthers over the past couple of years. And I think the East is going to be exciting, but I think it's going to be wide open. Everyone's got zeros on the board when it starts, and the East is going to be wide open with some great teams and some great hockey. It's the best time of year. Even with the pollen we breathe in every single day in North Carolina, it's the best time of year, and the playoffs are around the corner, and we couldn't be more excited.
Well, that's a great story. And the pollen for sure has got us all kind of sneezing and doing different things. You mentioned kryptonite. I've been watching with my wife. We've been watching the Smallville series from some years ago, and it's a lot of fun when you get into kryptonite. So, yeah, I thought that was kind of cute. Aaron?
Well, I think I've got 2 observations. The first one is I feel like that there has never been a time that I can remember watching the Carolina Hurricanes when it felt like those last 10, 8, 4 games just went so slowly. I mean, it feels like we've been waiting to get to the playoffs for the last month. And, I think that that's kind of a measure of where they are right now, that none of these games really feel like they mean anything. We knew they were going to clinch. We knew they were going to clinch the Metro. The East is still up for grabs. We'll see what happens there. But nobody's excited about that right now. It was more like, well, that's a foregone conclusion that they're going to do that. So let's get on to the real meaningful stuff. The other thing is that, when we talk about the Canes' style of play and how things have changed a little this year with the higher goal scoring, maybe a little bit more adventuresome issues, both positive and negative defensively, and all of the goaltending and everything else. It's been a long time since I've heard a national broadcast commentator say that the Carolina Hurricanes are boring. They're not a boring team this year. I feel like that is going into this year's playoffs. We're not going to hear that they're boring because they're not playing the same way that they have in the past, and they're getting a lot more offense out of this lineup. So you can't. Last night's game was certainly not boring, and maybe we should have been a little more boring. I think Rod would have preferred that, but we're not seeing that. We're not seeing that particular label being thrown against the Carolina Hurricanes this year, and I think that that's going to be something to watch for as the playoffs begin and those broadcasts kind of start to go national, and we see how the Canes are looked at. Because in the few national broadcasts that I have watched this year, I've not heard the word boring once.
Yeah. That's quite a good observation because, of course, we have heard it in previous years, and They will not say that this year, I'm sure. Katie, wrapping up.
I think the thing that gives me the most encouragement, besides all of the stats and trends that we've already hit on and talked about, is just the fact that this year's Canes are very adaptable. In the past, the Canes had the reputation of dump and chase, throw pucks on net, hope you get lucky. And they have been so much more than that. One of my favorite guests that are on the broadcast recently has been Mike Kelly, who's done a lot of the stats and stuff. And he's really touched on the rush chances that have been created by the Canes and how successful they have been with that. And so I think that the Canes can play their style, but if another team changes it up or frustrates it a little bit, they are going to be adaptable. They'll be able to switch back to that dump and chase mode if that's what they need to do in order to get pucks deep into the offensive zone, or they can tighten it up in the neutral zone. They can lock it down wherever they need to lock it down, or they can open it up where it needs to be opened up. And because there are so many different types of teams in the East that they are potentially going to have to go through, I think that's going to give them a big advantage moving forward, because I truly believe they can play with anybody, but I don't think that most teams can play with them, at least not for a 7-game series.
Yeah, I totally agree. They're a different team this year, and I think that's where we kicked all of this off, saying, is this the season where, it all comes together? And the other thing I want to mention, just as wrapping up, is the work that Eric Tulsky and his team did. Putting this team together, going back to a couple of years ago where we had that very difficult cap situation. We had players leaving, players we loved, in fact, heading out. And he went and found a bunch of players. He gets Walker, he gets Gostisbehere, he gets Robinson, he gets others. And those folks have all been significant contributors. So I think there's a lot of different stories here. Gosh, we could talk about Tom Dundon and what he's done to support all of this. So it's a great story, and hopefully this is the year the Canes go deep. Shane, as always, it's just a pleasure to have you on. Thank you so much.
Well, it was great to see y'all again. Enjoyed the time, and we're a week away, so we got to get our rest and get ready to enjoy the playoffs. What we hope will be a very long playoff run into June.
Well, yeah, we certainly feel that, and hopefully we can have you come back at some point if it is a long run, and join us as we continue to follow very closely what happens with the Canes as they round out the season and head into the playoffs. For those of you who've been watching or listening, of course, we're delighted you spent time with us today. If you like the episode, please press the like button. If you have comments or questions to anyone on the group, please put those in the comment section. Of course, if you want to be alerted of future episodes of Storm Tracker, please press the subscribe and the bell buttons, and you'll be made aware just as soon as they're available. As always, we thank you so much for spending time with us and look forward to getting together with you real soon, right here on Storm Tracker.